Welcome, parents. Can you guys hear me okay in the back? All right. Thank you for coming, and thank you to those who are tuning in online. I'm J.C. Owens. I am the director of the counseling department and one of the 3 college and career counselors. I work with students and families, last names A through E. Also here this evening, and you'll be hearing from shortly, are Gina Baselak and Kyle Tripolcher. As you walked in, you had the option of grabbing a handout of the presentation. Also on the slide, there is a QR code that links to the presentation if you'd like to follow along with that. Some of the presentation includes hyperlinks. So we will additionally tomorrow at some time send out the whole slides presentation. And it's also accessible on the high school section of the school counseling section of the high school website if you ever want to refer back to the presentation or any of the contents. Before we start, we've kind of got a nice intimate crowd here this evening and kind of want to just take a quick poll. How many of you, your senior is your oldest or only child? Okay, I kind of figured that might be the case. How many of your seniors know what they want to do after high school as far as college, career, military? Just by a show of hands. Okay, very good. And if you raised your hand and your student is college bound, how many of them have started an application? Impressive, very good, okay. Thank you. That gives us an idea of kind of who we're speaking to so we can tailor it a little bit. But tonight we are really going to dig into both the college search and real heavy in the college application, as well as a little bit into financial aid. But we will have a separate evening for that entirely. So whether this is your youngest, oldest, or only child, we just wanted to let you know that we are very excited to partner with you in this journey. Together, the 3 of us have over 52 years of experience in college and career advisement, higher education, financial aid. We are always connecting with schools across the country to learn about opportunities at their school and kind of what they're looking for in their application, dates and deadlines, things of that nature. So we are super excited to be working with you and your students along this journey. Tonight, again, we're going to be sharing important information pertaining to senior year. We're going to go over tips for college-bound seniors and information regarding your role as a parent and how you can support your students' journey. To better serve students and families, a few years ago, Brecksville Heights High School went to a college counseling model. And again, you're going to hear from all of us this evening, but this is how we break down the alphabet in supporting your student. We wanted to start with making sure that we are in constant communication throughout this year, especially. We do send out a Monday email from our office that includes things like colleges visiting, scholarship opportunities, important dates and deadlines. So if you are not receiving that Monday email, please email the appropriate college and career counselor and we will make sure that you start receiving those emails. We also have both Twitter and Instagram pages that you're welcome to follow us on. And then we're always accessible for one-on-one appointments and advising and things of that nature, either in person or via email. So we told your students when we met with them last week, regardless of what time of day or weekends, whenever they're working on college applications, if a question is to arise, we want them in that moment to email us with what question they're on or what section of the application they're on and what their question is so that we can get back to them. If we're finding that it's kind of multiple questions or more of an advisement type thing, we do suggest that they schedule an appointment with us. You should have received, in the email that went out today, a link to schedule an appointment, and we have already seen that many seniors and parents have filled that out. So if you want to have a one-on-one appointment with us, we welcome that. You would click there and you would go ahead and put in your preference of day and time, and if it's student only or student and parent. And we can just work with your schedule. Sometimes we have the student in front of us in the office and the parent on the phone or on a Google Meet or something like that. But we told your student that we would prefer that you be involved in the process as much as possible, so if you can be at that meeting too, that would be great. Just to kind of review what your student has done or should have already been working on, beginning freshman year, we had them taking college entrance exams. So freshman year they did PSAT, sophomore year they did pre-ACT, and last year they did PSAT as well. So they have these college entrance practice test scores should they need to take a college entrance test. We have also, throughout the years, and usually pushing into English class, have done some college and career searches with them, and many of them through Naviance. And those are all things they can go back and continue to refine, and we encourage them to do so, especially if they're unsure of career direction. There are great career assessments within Naviance that they can continue to take, and we can help them with that. Like I said, we've gotten in the English classes. We have helped them create a professional resume, so every single senior should have a professional resume. We encourage them to update that because it was last updated, I think, mid-junior year. So to go in and add any additional activities that they have done, up to date. They did all take an SAT during the school day last year, and many of them have taken ACT and SATs on their own for the Saturday administrations. And then regarding college exploration and visitation, that's both when colleges come here to meet with them, which we'll talk about, and also them getting on college campuses. So hopefully they've already done that, or if not, are beginning to do that. Bringing us up to date, so last week we were in senior English classes, and we did present some of the information we're going to be presenting tonight to you, but we shared this presentation with them. We also gave them a senior packet, which we're going to go over. We would like each senior to complete a senior questionnaire. That was a Google form that was emailed to them. It's only seen by their assigned college and career counselor, and it really just helps us know how we can support them, what their current aspirations are, and what they need help with. So that senior questionnaire is very helpful for us in supporting your student. We are asking them to continue to visit colleges, do some, real internal investigation about what's important to them so that they can make a college list that meets their interests and their academic and interest profile. If they need to, and we'll talk about testing later on, taking another ACT or SAT perhaps this fall. And then really right now we are encouraging them to work on the application, whether it's the common application or a college-specific application, including, if it's the common application, their college essay, which they all did for a summer assignment in their BBHHS English class. Finally, the last point there is updating that resume, as I mentioned, and also completing an autobiographical sketch. That really only needs to be done if they need a letter of recommendation, which again we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. Senior packet. This is a document that includes a lot of important information that we ask your student to bookmark because they're gonna need to refer back to it. The first page of that document is a checklist of kind of, through now until the end of senior year, what they need to be sure that they're paying attention to. It also has important senior dates all the way up until graduation. There is a link in the senior packet to local scholarship application. And we will send many reminders about this, but in January, we need them to submit a local scholarship application. We are very, very fortunate in this district to have a lot of scholarship donors through Schools Foundation, private organizations, families, and we award those scholarship dollars to the students that complete the local scholarship application. It's a very simple application, but as we told your student, very easy to forget to do. But we will send many reminders, so that's due in January. Also within the senior packet are the steps to apply to college, which we're going to go over in detail this evening. Application tips, especially on the Common App, different ways to approach the sections of that. And finally, other important websites that they might want to refer to, specifically for scholarship searching. So I would, again, encourage you to bookmark the senior packet, and as we encourage your student to do as well. So the senior packet, it was emailed out, but we also will email it out tomorrow morning when we email out this presentation. And if they want a printed copy, they can come to our office and get it as well. All right, steps to apply to college. If you went to college yourself, it has gotten far more complex, and there are many different steps, many different pieces and parts. So we have tried to kind of simplify a complex process and broke it down into 5 steps, 4 of which most students will do, and some will also do 5. So we're going to kind of walk through those steps. We explain to the student the first step has to be them starting a college application. Not finishing, not submitting, but starting a college application. All the other pieces and parts of the application can't be completed until they have at least started an application. There are essentially 2 different ways to apply for most students, and that's either through the common application, which over 90% of colleges and universities do use the common application, so most of our students, that's how they apply. They could also apply directly on the college's website. So either common application or the college's website. But again, the first step is in the student's hands and to start an application. This is something I would encourage you to, and we encourage your students to look back at. Common application, again, where most of our students apply, this is a link to list of best practices and tips. Okay, for example, one of them that you will read about is in the activities section of the common application. Students are allowed to list up to 10 activities, so any clubs, sports, work, volunteer that they've done. One of the tips that you're going to read about is the order in which they list the activities does matter. So a reader would prefer to see the first activity that they read, the first one listed, to be the activity that they've been involved in for the longest or perhaps had leadership within, spend the most time doing. So that's just one of the many tips that you will learn about when you look at this common application tips and best practices. Some of the other information that your student will need handy when doing the common application, they will need their transcript or to have access to their transcript. So when we went in the classes last week, we handed them all a transcript, okay, because they are going to need to know their GPA. They're going to need to know different information that they're going to get from their transcript. At any time, if you need it or your student lost theirs, just email us. We can get you their transcript. But they're going to need that information, and then the next few slides has information that they will also need handy. School information, school code, address. They're going to be asked their class size, so 311 for the class of 2025. The last 3 bullets here on this slide, we get a lot of questions about. So on the common application, they will be asked to report their class rank. We only rank the top 10% of students. So for the class of 2025, you have to have over a 4.4 cumulative GPA to be in the top 10%, which is crazy. So to benefit students, if they are not in the top 10%, so when they got that transcript, if there was not a rank on that transcript, they are to report no rank, okay? And that's okay. Many high schools don't rank anymore. So if they have a rank on the transcript, that means they're in the top 10%, they report it. If not, they're gonna report rank none. GPA scale and type, we are a 4-point scale and it is weighted. So those are common things we see misreported. So make sure that they're indicating the right type of scale and rank. They are going to need their college and career counselor's contact information. So we have that there for you. The second step, and we will have questions at the end. We're going to open up to questions at the end. We will also stay around to ask individual questions. So the first step, again, is them starting the application. So really, when I say starting the common application, they just need to put in their personal information. They need to do basically the first section, and then they need to add at least 1 college, okay? After they add 1 college, they're going to go to the college tab and they're going to complete the FERPA waiver, okay? That is basically giving permission for the school to communicate with the college. So they need to do that one time and one time only. Once they've done their Common App, they've added one college, they've completed the FERPA release waiver, then they need to match Naviance and Common App. And let me just pause for a minute to kind of explain that. So Common App is how the students apply to college, most of them. Again, they can apply directly through the school's website, or they can apply through Common App. Naviance is what our school district has purchased and uses to submit transcripts, letters of recommendation, Common App teacher reports, and other pieces and parts of the application that are required directly to the school. So the student is working mainly in Common App. The only thing they're really doing in Naviance is going in there and giving and basically matching their Naviance and Common App. So all the Common App stuff is pulled to Naviance, so we on the school side can see the schools they're applying to, their deadlines, how many recommendations they need. And we showed this video to your student, and I'm gonna show it to you guys now. They need to match their accounts in order for us on the school end to submit anything on their behalf. So I'm just gonna let this play here real quick so that you can see what that looks like if you're supporting your student at home.
If you are applying to a Common App college and your school uses Naviance eDocs, you'll need to complete Common App account matching in Naviance Student after you create your account on the Common App website. Once you complete the Common App matching, you'll be able to request transcripts and teacher letters of recommendation directly from Naviance Student. This video will walk you through the steps of creating an account on the Common App website and completing the Common App account matching in Naviance Student. Step 1. Open a web browser and go to www.commonapp.org. Step 2. Click Create an Account, and then select the First Year Student option. Step 3. Enter your email address and password, then complete all information required on the page. Please note, it is important to remember your Common App email and password because you will need it later to match your account. Now that you've created your Common App account, follow these next steps to complete your registration. Step 1. Go to the Common App tab and complete the required profile, family, education, and other information listed on the left-hand side. Be sure to go to the Education section and add the school you are currently attending under the area of the page for Current or Most Recent Secondary High School. Simply click the Find School button and search for your school. Step 2. Go to the College Search tab, locate at least one college you are applying to, and click the plus sign to add the college. Step 3. Go to the My Colleges tab. Here, you will see all colleges that you added listed on the left. Select the college name and go to the Recommenders and FERPA section. Click Complete Release Authorization, read and follow the prompts, and complete the FERPA authorization form. You've now completed the initial steps for creating a Common App account. As a final review, before you match your account in Naviance Student, you'll need to do the following on the Common App website. 1. Create a Common App account. 2. Find and add the current school you are attending. 3. Add at least one college to your Common Application list. And 4. Sign the FERPA release authorization form. Now that you have your Common App account set up and have completed the initial steps, it's time to match your account in Naviance Student. From the Naviance Student homepage, click Colleges I'm applying to in the My Favorites section. At the top of your application list, you will see a pink banner indicating you need to match your Common App account if you have not already done so. Click Match Accounts. A new tab will open in your browser to the Common App website. Enter the email and password you used when you created your Common App account on commonapp.org. Click Sign In. Check off the I agree checkbox to authorize the connection, then click Connect. A notification will display that you'll be redirected back to Naviance. If you have followed all the steps outlined in this video, your Common App account and Naviance account should now be matched, and the colleges listed in your Common App account should now be listed in your Naviance Student college colleges I'm applying to list.
So it truly is pretty straightforward. I just sat with a student today and kind of saw them go through the process. But we did tell the student if you're doing this and you're having difficulty, if you just have this window opened up, it really does walk you through pretty well. If you as a student, or you as a parent, are helping at home, it is important and necessary that you're in the student's Naviance account, not the parent. The parent account is really just view only, so you will not be able to do this step. So if you're supporting your student, make sure you're in their account when you're doing the matching. So the student has started an application, they've done the FERPA, and they've matched their accounts. The third step is letters of recommendation. Okay, and there are multiple steps within letters of recommendation. The first step being finding out if they need a letter of recommendation. Not all colleges require, and not all will even accept letters of recommendation. So they can find that information in two different spots. If they're doing the common application, when they add the college, they're going to get some important information. They're going to get what the deadlines are for the college, if there's maybe an early action deadline and a regular decision deadline, maybe even early decision deadline. So they're going to find out all the different ways to apply in the deadlines. They're also going to see if letters of recommendation are required or allowed, and if so, how many. So we told your student the very first thing they need to do for the schools they know for sure they're applying to is find out if they need letters of recommendation. If they are allowed only one, for example, Miami University allows only one, it does need to be from either a teacher or a counselor, somebody that can comment on, their educational career and their abilities within school. Okay, if they are allowed more than one recommender, it could be an advisor, coach, employer. So the first thing is, do they need one? And if so, we encourage them to ask face-to-face. So go up to the teacher, would you mind providing a letter of recommendation? It would be helpful if they shared with them their earliest deadline. And then once the teacher says, yes, I'm going to show you in a minute, they need to formally request that in Naviance. That's how the teacher gets permission to go ahead and provide that letter of recommendation and send it off to the schools. I mentioned the resume a couple times. Any recommender, whether it's teacher, counselor, even if it's somebody outside of the school district, it's very helpful for us to have a copy of their resume so that we can learn things outside of what we've seen in school. So that's kind of something that they need to give a resume to the recommender, and also an autobiographical sketch, which was just shared with them last week. And it's just basically a few questions. And it gives them a voice to their letter of recommendation. So it's super helpful when we write letters to have both the resume and the autobiographical sketch. And then the final step for the teacher one is to formally request that in Naviance. And it's very simple. They go in there, they go to letters of recommendation, and then there's a drop down of all the staff in the building. They click the staff member's name. And then they indicate what colleges they want the recommender to send to. So they can say send to all my colleges, or they can hand pick what colleges receive what letters of recommendation. We tried to let the student know too, this is above and beyond requirements for teachers. They can say no. Unfortunately, sometimes they have to say no because they get so many requests, and they're doing these letters of recommendation in their evenings and their weekends. So we ask them, the students, as soon as you find out you need one, ask the teacher very soon. And then also make sure that you're asking well in advance of any college deadline, because the idea is that both the application and all the pieces and parts, the letter of recommendation being one of those, are in by the stated deadline for each individual college. If they need a counselor recommendation, and we find this a lot with private schools, Case Western, for example, requires a counselor recommendation. Kind of a little different process. We also would like the resume and autobiographical sketch, but they are not requesting us in Naviance. They are filling out a form that is within this presentation. It's in the senior packet, so it's on our website, many different places. So they are going to fill out this form, And we ask, if possible, that it's done by October 4th, because we each write, I don't know, about 50 each a year. So we too need to organize our evenings and weekends when we're writing these letters of recommendation. So if they could let us know, yes, I am applying to school that needs a counselor recommendation by October 4th, that would be ideal. Obviously, if they're adding a college later than that and they find out they need one, we're still going to do it. We just ask for time to get that done. And it's not on here, but if they need a recommendation from somebody or want a recommendation for somebody that does not work here, they would need to request that through Common App. On Common App, under the colleges, there is an other recommender option. So they would put in the name and email address of the recommender. So examples would be a CCP instructor, a CVCC instructor, an employer, a coach that doesn't teach here and wouldn't have a Naviance account. So those are done through Common App. Any school employee is done through Naviance. Okay. The fourth step must be kind of the last step. So this is where they request a transcript. This is letting us know in the office that they have completed an application and they're ready for us to send a transcript. We don't want them to request transcripts now because we will process them now and they will be sent to the college and they will not have an application to match it to, okay? So the transcript request form, it's an electronic form and they just list the college that they want us to send it to and their deadline. So it is quite possible that they might do multiple transcript request forms because they have different deadlines and they're doing their applications at different times, and that's fine. We check this document daily and we process them in order received. But if it's getting close to big deadlines, November 1st is a big deadline for a lot of schools. And just know that our office gets really, really busy. So we just ask that maybe they don't wait till the day before a deadline or certainly not the day of a deadline to put in this transcript request form because it does take time to process. The fifth step may or may not apply to your student, and we're going to talk in a little while about ACT and SAT and test optional. What does that mean? Do I send a test score or not? But if your student does want to submit a test score, that is not part of their transcript. They need to go on to College Board for SAT or ACT's website to request the score to be sent. If they already had the school listed when they registered for the test, great. If not, they're going to have to go back in, and College Board and ACT makes a killing because they're going to charge you $10, $15 per score that you send per school. It's kind of crazy. But if they need to send a test score, it needs to come directly from the testing agency. And the final note on the college application process, because there are so many pieces and parts, there's the student side, and they need to get the application submitted by the deadline. There's the recommendation letters, there's the transcript. It is a time to remind your student not to panic, because what will happen, the minute they submit an application, some colleges and universities send an automatic email saying, your application's incomplete. We don't have your transcript, or we don't have your letter of recommendation. Well, no, because they just submitted, and the other pieces and parts aren't there yet. So don't panic. When we send the transcript from our office, we will email you and your student saying it was submitted to this school at this date and this time, so that you guys know that everything went through. But it does take a minute for it all to catch up and be registered on the college end. Speaking of college end and college timeline, just a very generic timeline just to give you an idea. Between now and November, that is when we're encouraging those one-on-one meetings with the college and career counselor. We're encouraging students to be working on their applications, getting those letters of recommendation, taking additional ACTs or SATs if necessary and applicable, and continuing to connect with colleges that come on campus and getting to college campuses, and ultimately applying. So the goal would be to hit all early deadlines to be done with applications by October 31st. That's a goal. It's not a necessary thing because the college deadlines do vary, but just again, a general timeline. And then they're kind of done with their piece, and then the weight game starts. So December 1st is when the FAFSA opens up. That's also, January, I mentioned the local scholarships due. That's when they can turn their focus to scholarship searching. And that's when you will also start sometime hopefully before April receiving financial aid packages for merit and need-based aid from the colleges that your student applied to. May 1st, as far as we know, some colleges did push it back last year, but as far as we know at the moment is the national college commitment and deposit date. So it all happens super quickly, but again, we are here to support you, and I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Baisla.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So I'm going to jump into this new opportunity this year for the class of 2025, and following classes is our new Latin honors system. So we introduced this to your seniors, and basically an application will go out to your seniors from Mr. Jacob shortly, and they have until the end of the first semester to apply for this, and it's either the cum laude, magna cum laude, or summa cum laude honor system. And there are cords that they can purchase for the graduation to be honored for these. So we told your students about this and to be looking in their emails and looking for communications for this year. And as far as the class of 2025, they will be honored this way, as well as the ranking if they are in the top 10% of their class. Then moving forward for the class of 2026 and beyond, it will strictly be this Latin honor system. If you have any questions about this, especially with your students when we're doing our one-on-one meetings, I know today I had one with a student. We're more than happy to kind of go through that with them and break it down with them, but they will be getting a communication in a Google form from Mr. Jacob shortly. So we talked with your students about finding the right fit. We realized that very much so they might be still kind of in that college search process and really kind of whittling it down to what colleges they're going to apply to. And it really is about finding the right fit. What are they looking for in a school, and what are the schools looking for in their incoming class? A resource that we have is Mrs. Borash, who works with our students that might be still kind of in that career exploration phase. She uses a lot of resources specifically from Naviance and some additional resources that she has access to help students kind of narrow down to maybe a particular field of interest, maybe doing some job shadowing, and so on and so forth. So at this time, if your student is still in that phase, we have lots of resources. I know even Mrs. Owens and myself are working with some students today on pulling up some of those career interest inventories and helping them kind of lead into a possible major or field of study. So again, reach out to your counselor, use your resources to help you in that career exploration and college exploration. As far as the college selection process, it's so important for students to kind of take the lead on this and know what they're looking for in a school, know themselves, know what's important to them. It's going to be very unique from one student to another. Know your credentials. Obviously, that's why we're handing out the transcripts. Know what classes you've taken, what your strengths and your weaknesses are. And then really taking advantage of the resources that are in front of you, meeting with your college counselors. There's lots of college career fairs that are happening between now and November 1st. So getting to some of those career or college fairs, talking to some of these admissions counselors. As Mrs. Owens mentioned, some of them are even coming to our school and recruiting students. So gathering that information and making those decisions so they can come up with those list of colleges that they're comfortable applying to. So I mentioned again the college visits. We've already had some schools here, some of the big ones, Ohio State, Miami, Akron, Cleveland State has been here. They come specifically to our high school. They come usually during some of the lunch periods. Your students can sign up through Naviance under the colleges tab, they can see a list of the colleges that are coming, and they can sign up for this and really talk to these college admissions reps, some of which are reading the applications from our students. So it's a really good way to ask more individual questions and get a sense of what it's like to attend some of these institutions and decide whether or not they're going to further pursue those colleges and apply. There's lots of different factors considered in admissions offices across the country. Many institutions take that holistic approach where they're looking at many different aspects in a student, not just the classes, not just their GPA, but things that they're involved in, their letters of recommendation, their essays, their writing abilities, their test scores. So that's something to consider and something we stress to your students, that overall it really is the whole picture. Some of the more prestigious, more selective colleges are going to look at kind of those top 3 factors. The top 3 factors meaning grades, test scores, and the strength of the curriculum. These 3 things tend to kind of open the door at these institutions. And then from there, they're digging in a little bit deeper into the application, whether it's looking at letters of recommendation and or essays, extracurricular activities and leadership, and so on and so forth. So all of these things are good to keep in mind as you're creating that college application list, and really finding out where you fit in these institutions that you're applying to, whether you're picking some schools that might be some reach schools, some schools that might be some safety schools, some schools you just really know you would be happy with and be a good fit no matter what when you're coming up with that final list. I know we talked a little bit about writing essays. It was a summer reading assignment. I know the English teachers here at the high school are working heavily with your students on getting those submitted and getting them critiqued, and even some of them just kind of the pieces parts being rewritten, so that way they are ready to go for the deadlines for the various institutions that they're applying to. I know myself, Mrs. Owens, Mr. Drypolcher, we're also more than happy to review essays for content and to give some feedback as well. So admissions definitions, there are different ways to apply or different deadlines for applications depending on the goal of your particular student. A very popular one is early action, which is that November 1 deadline. This is simply applying early to an institution and getting an answer back earlier, whether that be like early December or mid-December. There are some advantages of that early action, because if you are getting it in ahead of time, you're maybe in a different application pool of students. So I would encourage, and this is what we suggested to your students, talk to your counselor, talk to admission reps about what is best for you and your particular, for the student and where they're deciding to apply. There is something called early decision as well. This limits a student because you can apply to one school early decision, one school only. There is kind of the caveat of that is that if you do apply early decision, if that institution allows that, you're agreeing, or it's a binding agreement, that if you get accepted to that institution, you are pulling all other applications from all the other institutions you've applied to, and you're committing to them. And so, again, it's kind of that bigger decision of what is the best for your student. We encourage you to reach out to your counselor and talk to us individually about what's the best plan of action. The rolling admission, that's simply just a deadline that colleges are accepting applications throughout the year until they've met their maximum number, their maximum quota of students that they're going to apply or accept for that particular school year. So we talked a little bit about college entrance tests, whether it's the ACT or the SAT. Many of your students have probably sat for both, or at least we know they sat for one last year in March as juniors. So again, it's their responsibility to make sure they're looking at the institutions, determining if those institutions need those as part of the application process, if they're required, or if they're optional. It's always good to run it by your counselor as well. If it's optional, is it a good idea to send my test score? Does that test score represent me in a positive way? And a great way to look at that is, the average test score that was accepted the previous year. Where do I as a student lie with that? Do I meet that criteria? Do I exceed that criteria? That's kind of a good question to ask as to whether or not to send your test score if it's optional part of the application. Some of the institutions do require test scores, maybe for part of the merit-based scholarships, so we encourage your students to look into that as well. It might not be a part of the application process, but it might be part of maybe the honors college or the merit-based scholarships that they can receive based on GPA or test scores. These are the websites. Again, Mrs. Owens mentioned we don't send the test scores on behalf of the student. The student has to go directly to the testing agency website and have them sent directly from them. Here is a list of the test dates. This will be helpful for you guys and helpful for students if they're planning on retaking here in the next few months to try and maybe get that close score. Maybe they're trying to get a point or two above what they have. Maybe it is for merit-based scholarships, or it is for admissions. So it's good for them to plan for this, know their deadlines to register. So you can locate this on our presentation or obviously on the ACT or SAT website. So we talked a little bit about this already, the test optional. Again, we emphasize to your students to make sure they know where each institution that they're applying to, where they stand as far as test optional goes. Many institutions are still following this test optional route as a fallout of COVID. If they are planning to take another SAT or ACT between now and submitting college applications, there's still lots of opportunities for them to get some free test prep options. Khan Academy, I know our students are very familiar with this. A lot of teachers in our classrooms use Khan Academy, so that can be a resource. Princeton Review is one. Naviance Test Prep is another one. Again, just help them prepare where they would plug in a test date that they're going to be sitting for, and it would work with them on their strengths, their weaknesses, and kind of gear them up for an SAT or an ACT. Again, just a plug of the sending the test scores, we require that your student log into ACT or SAT and have them sent directly from the testing agencies. We don't have test scores sent from our office. They're not on the transcripts. So again, just making sure that they follow that step of the college application process if necessary. Next, we're going to move to Mr. Drypolcher, who's going to talk a little bit about financing college.
Good evening, I'm Mr. Drypolcher. I have students' last names P through Z. So financing college, there's the admissions piece and there's the financial aid piece, and there are two separate entities in a way, because the admissions piece is based on grades and academics and all of those things, and the financing piece is, well, I guess there's some correlation with scholarships, but really oftentimes the financial end is really the parents and sometimes the students working together to kind of determine what's the best fit and what makes sense fiscally. So scholarships, we have scholarship links on Naviance regularly that we send out for scholarship opportunities. You can submit the local scholarship application by January 31st, and this is to be considered for the local scholarships. If you've had older students of your own or have heard, we have it's called Senior Awards and Scholarships Night in May, where these scholarships are presented. January 31st is a bit of a way off, but it is good to keep in mind and probably earmark this or have this link ready. The application takes a couple minutes to fill out, and all seniors are eligible. There's a traditional fastweb.com. I started in higher education about 17 years ago at this point. And Fastweb has been around at least since I started, and I think before me, where it is a scholarship database. It's free to set up an account, so you can go on there and pretty much find scholarships. Once you fill out an account and set up search parameters, you can search by geographic location, you can search by scholarship amount or cost, you can search by academic GPA, along ethnicity and different scholarships, anything that's really out there, you can kind of customize the search to fit what you want. So that's something to keep in mind if you haven't had the chance to fill out an account, or maybe you and your student want to go on and look at FastWeb. You know, at the very least, even if maybe ultimately it's not, you know, giving you that $25,000 scholarship you want, which the reality is most scholarships out there for most students may be $500, $1,000, $1,500, but you know that money can certainly go a long way, even if it's covering books or part of room and board or tuition. You know, all the dollars count. Grants and loans. We will have a financial aid night, and I have a slide ahead of this to give a plug on that. Even if students don't think, or families don't think they will qualify for any type of need-based aid from the universities, the FAFSA, or Free Application for Federal Student Aid, should open up in December. And basically what this allows students to do, you fill out the form, it's based on as the parent, your tax information. So your W-2 from the prior year would be used to fill it out. The website is fafsa.ed.gov. This is a government site. The big rule of thumb is if you find yourself looking up the FAFSA and it's telling you to pay, leave immediately. It is free to fill out. So if you find yourself in a scenario where it's asking you to pay money to fill out the FAFSA, you're not in the right spot. It takes about an hour and a half to fill out if you're taking your time. The nice thing about it electronically is it's very hard to make a mistake. If you miss a box or a value isn't correct, it won't let you move forward. So even if you might think, okay, well, I have the financial burden of maybe making enough money where I know I'm not going to qualify for any type of actual need-based aid, but not enough where I can pay for college entirely out of pocket as a parent. The FAFSA also offers opportunities for grants and also federal student loans, which is a conversation for another time. But just things to be aware of on the financial side of things. And some colleges will also require what's called the CSS profile, which is similar to the FAFSA, but a little different. So again, Financial Aid Night is December 16th at 7 o'clock p.m. It's going to be here in the auditorium. We have the folks from the Kent State University Financial Aid Department who have been doing this for us as an event for probably 3 or 4 years and do a phenomenal job. So if you have time, maybe put that on your calendar. Definitely going to be very informative on the financial side of the college process. Okay, so some pointers for students. So we talked about, and Mrs. Bazelak talked about the finding your fit and some of those factors. Things to remember for your students, for them to take charge of the college application process. So the process is theirs. You know, at the end of the day, it's not mom or dad or friend or aunts, uncles who are going to be living on these campuses and going to these classes and making these decisions. So they really have to take charge of the process because ultimately they're the individual who's going to be on that campus next year. You want to stay organized with, you know, the forms and deadlines and requirements. We've talked a lot about this. We have all of the hyperlinks in here so you can review everything as you need to. You know, as students, myself at 17 years old, I sometimes probably was not as organized as I needed to be. So as parents, let your student take charge, but there's certainly nothing wrong with saying, hey, we know these are our deadlines. It's probably wise for us to get things done ahead of time. Where are you at with your Common App? Have you spoken to your teachers for recommendation letters? And just kind of aiding and guiding and supporting that process. Communicating, and that kind of feeds into it, with parents, with counselors and teachers throughout the process. You know, I think sometimes the biggest tragedy is students will tell me, and I'm sure all of us have been in this position where they'll come down and say, I feel like I've missed a deadline or I'm in a tight spot. I don't know what to do. I should have come a couple weeks ago, but I was afraid to, or I didn't want to ask a question because I think, you know, I was going to look silly. There are no dumb questions when it comes to the college process. And like Mrs. Owen said, even if you did yourself, as many of you have gone to college, even if you've gone to college 10 or 15 years ago, and I'm sure most of you, it would be much longer than that, it has changed entirely. So, there's nothing wrong with asking questions about how the Common App works, how the colleges operate, because everything, it's forever evolving. Again, focusing on the right fit. Fit does not necessarily mean a name brand school, doesn't mean the most expensive school, the most exclusive or competitive school. It is where you feel comfortable. I think if you were to talk to colleges about their retention rates, because for colleges, one of their big metrics they use are the students who show up in August of their freshman year still there in May and walk across the stage of senior year. And that determining factor is goodness of fit. Are those students happy there? Does their major in the programs they're looking at match their interests and abilities? Is the campus, are they comfortable there? Did they make friends there? Does it have things that interest them? So all of those aspects of fit are crucial for students when selecting the right college. We don't have a crystal ball, obviously, and I've told students this all the time. Sometimes the school that you might find yourself at in your first semester, maybe you thought it was your dream school, or maybe it seemed perfect, and now you've been there and you realize, okay, I guess I'm not as happy as I thought I was going to be. Maybe some things didn't shake out quite like students wanted them to. It's okay if students end up transferring or going elsewhere, right? There's no perfect future-telling crystal ball way to do this, but if students come out of the gate and are really looking at a lot of these factors, it's far more likely that they'll stay where they're at or pick a school they're happy at if they look at some of these things along the way. Don't panic. We are here as counselors to help you. Teachers can help you. This is kind of an odd process, and I tell students this all the time. Most of the things in your life you do the first time, it's daunting, and then you do it again and it gets a little easier. You really only apply to college once. And then by the time they're sitting in your shoes as parents, they will have forgotten pretty much everything they did, and the process will have completely changed. So we're here to help, and we'll get through it. Okay, social media presence. So as parents, I'm sure most of you are living in the realities of adolescent students. This wasn't around. And when most of you, I'm sure all of you were in high school, myself, Mrs. Bazelak, I think in a lot of ways it was very fortunate that we didn't have our lives documented on videos and through posts. I think students are becoming more mindful of what they're putting out there on social media. I think there's been a lot of, they've seen news and things about situations where basically these things can be used, social media can be used for a very positive, methods of communication. It's not going anywhere. We've noticed that as professionals, and we're trying to embrace the ways that it can be used for good. But on the flip side, especially when you have 16 or 17 or even 18-year-old young people who might still be in that growing and maturing stage, that sometimes what they put out there is not always maybe portraying them in the best light. So I've told students, and I say this in my senior presentations, I see this in my one-on-one presentations, I tell students, take some time now, if you're on any of these social media platforms, which I'm sure most of them are on at least one or two. The Facebook we know is ancient. We keep it out there just because. I like to keep everything symmetrical on the slide. But if there are videos or posts or things, and students, and a good rule of thumb I say is, hey, if you don't want your grandma to read this, if you don't want your priest or pastor to read this, if you don't want your friends' parents to see this, now is a good time to go on there and kind of clean things up so you're portraying an image that you'd want people to see. This is not a doom and gloom comment, but there have been situations, not only here, and I've experienced this myself as a counselor, but nationally you hear about students losing out on scholarships or maybe losing admission or other things, opportunities because of things they put out online. And the tragedy is oftentimes those aren't things that personify who they are. It was a silly moment in time that now is going to stick with them and going to take some time to overcome. So just be mindful of the social media stuff. Okay. Recommendations from college admissions counselors to seniors, and this is coming from a former assistant director of admission. Keep your grades up through the entire year. I can't stress enough, we have students who obviously work very hard. All of your students work hard. And when they realize that, the transcript that we're sending to these schools goes up through the end of junior year, sometimes they say, okay, well, the senior year is like just open season. I want to have fun. I want to do this with my friends. You know, I could maybe get a B where I normally could get an A. Or maybe I might not work as hard in this class because, you know, does this grade really matter? The selective schools and many of the schools that I'm sure most of you in this room, your students are looking at, it is not uncommon for them to say, I'd like to see some updated grades in the 7th semester, which would be in January. Or for a scholarship, we want to see some updated grades in GPA. So keeping the grades up through their entire career from start to finish is very important. Strong and competitive classes during the senior year, staying strong in the core areas. Our scheduling conversations with your students last spring as juniors, and we all are pretty, as much as sometimes the students don't like to hear it, adamant about saying, are you sure this is the best schedule for you? Do you think you might want to put physics on there for a science? Do you think it would be wise to challenge yourself and take an AP elective? Sometimes students want to coast, and we can certainly understand that. But it is important to remember that acceptance to college is contingent on all 4 years, not just 3 or not just 1. Okay, so pointers for you as parents, which is hopefully why many of you are here, is to get some thoughts and some perspectives on what you can do, again, to support your student. Let them control the application process. We've been over this. Offer support, but do not do the applications for him or her or them. I think one of the biggest things that I run into, and it doesn't happen necessarily all the time, but it's normally maybe a parent each year, there's a lot of confusion with the Common App, and it's not matching to Naviance, and I can't get things to submit, just to realize that the parent has put their name and their email contact information into Common App, and it has caused a whole bunch of mess. So if you are in this room and say, okay, oh no, I think I did put my email in there, it's got to be, it has to be for the student to do, okay? Otherwise, on more than, you know, a couple fronts, it can get very confusing when everything is intertwined with parent emails and contact information, just to name one thing. But offer the support, obviously, students are going to be looking at multiple schools, being supportive of what they decide. I know sometimes it is hard if maybe they say, oh, I'm looking at this school, and as a parent, you're like, my goodness, I just don't think that's a good idea. You know, maybe work with them. It's okay to guide, but obviously, as you know, the harder you push, sometimes the harder they're going to push back. So working together to come to the kind of that middle ground is probably the best advice I can offer. Obviously, reassure them that you'll be proud of them regardless of those decisions that come out. Obviously, we have students who are going to be applying to some very selective schools. The reality is, even for our top students here, this is a phenomenal high school. But this is a big country with a lot of states and a lot of high schools and a lot of students. Those more selective colleges, many times the near perfect or perfect test scores and a high GPA is not the exception, it's the rule. And we do have students every year, and it is hard. I know being in their shoes at 17 or 18 years old, if a student gets deferred from maybe their dream school or maybe gets a denial letter from a school, and it can be very emotionally dejecting and draining. And as parents, to pick them up, to tell them that, ultimately, even if maybe what you thought was your goal or your path doesn't necessarily work out, that there's another plan for you, and you're proud of them no matter what. Using the resources that we have for you and that they're out there at your disposal, the counseling website, Naviance has a lot of great search tools. Like Mrs. Bazelak said, if your student's still in that, I have a couple schools, but I honestly could use probably 3 or 4 or maybe 5 or 6 more options. College Super Match tool, which we walked them through an exercise as juniors last year, is an excellent resource to find colleges. Again, kind of a database. You can put search criteria in to generate maybe some ideas for those students who might not have a robust college list. There is a school out there for everyone, and again, we're getting a little bit redundant on the goodness of fit, but there is a school for everybody out there, so being mindful of the fact that there are plenty of schools, and sometimes we have students who end up at schools that they never could have imagined, even 1 or 2 years ago, and it ends up being the best decision they ever made. So just be mindful of again, the goodness of fit. Okay, so we will open it up in a little bit to actual questions. We have some kind of frequently asked FAQ type questions here that we can kind of go through that are helpful. So, if I apply online, am I done with the process? No, and obviously as we talked about, so you complete the online application, which really is the first step from the student side. You still have to request a transcript, basically updating your Naviance and using that transcript request form, making sure that if you have a teacher recommendation letter, you request that via Naviance and you've talked to this teacher individually so they're aware of your timelines and deadlines, and having your test scores sent should you choose to do so, or should they be, well, not required at this point, but needed or encouraged. Okay, what happens if I apply online and then receive an email stating the admissions office did not receive my transcript and other materials from the counseling office? So online submission needs to catch up with what is sent from the counseling office. Check Naviance to confirm the status of what has been sent, and check your college websites to monitor your admission status. So when we send transcripts, we send emails through Naviance to the student and a parent, and it's normally the first parent email that we have in Naviance to say, your transcript was submitted today to Ohio State or Miami or Northwestern or wherever. The reality is, and I think sometimes students have a hard time understanding this, coming from a college admissions background, and I worked, one of the places was a small private school, we still had physical people sitting at computers who had to download those transcripts that came in and then physically using their fingers go on and check off received, received. You have Ohio State that has 50, 60, 70,000 of those, it takes time. So it might be 2 weeks from the time that something's been submitted to that person or that computer actually gets to noting that it has been received. So you will get those generated emails. The colleges use those as kind of a scare tool, I think, at times, where it's just, it sends it automatically because the more emails you get, the more likely you are to act and to get them what they need, keeping in mind that the reality is most of the time it is a lag in processing. Okay, should I wait until I take the AC or SAT to submit my application to the colleges? No, you should complete and send the applications as soon as you are ready. You can have your score sent later directly from the testing agency. Remember, admission and scholarship deadlines will not allow for late scores. So like this is a very kind of, I think, perfect example. We had Ohio State here speaking to the kids last week, and the question was, okay, I might want to send my test score if I retake it, and I think I can get my ACT or SAT up to, you know, a little bit above what their average is or right into that average range. Can I wait and send my scores later? And in Ohio State, for their early action deadline, their answer is you have to have your scores sent by November 1st. They should be in by November 1st. And a very good question a student asked is, I think they said they were taking one of the tests in the last, October 5th. But there's an even later date. And they said if you want your scores, if you take a test close to that November deadline, you can opt to send those test scores blind. Meaning you don't know what your score is, so you're opting that you're confident without even looking that you want those scores reviewed. I would say that's probably going to be students in the minority, but most of the time, if you're going to send those test scores, you want to get yourself set up so that test scores get in by those dates. Okay, what is the advantage of completing a college application early? A lot of this is kind of straightforward common sense. Students will be notified sooner regarding an admissions decision. I'll use another example, Ohio State, and I believe to an extent if you've talked to the folks at Miami, more scholarships and financial award opportunities are earlier in the application. So priority or preference for scholarships is going to be given to those students who apply early. One of the most reasonable things for applying early is if you know sooner, then you have time to look at all those other aspects of your decision making, right? So once you get the actual decision letter and maybe you're accepted and that's great, then you have more time to consider the nuts and bolts of the financial aid process and those other things. So it's easier if you know sooner because then you can weigh your realistic options as opposed to, okay, like Mrs. Owens said, universally the tuition deposit deadline, which is guaranteeing your spot in a freshman class, and if I'm not heard back, until March 15th or closer to April 1st, my back's really against the wall. So hearing earlier and knowing what your options are earlier can help to inform your decision-making process along the way. Do grades really count senior year. Don't high school transcripts just show grades 9 through 11? Yes, obviously, as we said, your transcript at this point stops at the end of junior year. That's what the colleges are going to see. Transcripts in the fall reflect all of those grades. Senior year does matter. Colleges and many of the selective institutions that students are looking at are going to expect or strongly encourage having a 7th semester transcript, and ultimately the final transcript, showing proof of graduation. So admission status can be revoked if the transcript shows a decline in performance. This doesn't necessarily happen often, but those students who are looking at these more selective universities or colleges or are hinging on some type of academic or merit scholarship, it really would be obviously a tragic scenario to find out that you qualified for something and then it was revoked due to a change in your academics. Must my letters of recommendation be from teachers? Obviously the answer is no, not necessarily. The recommender should be someone who knows you well. It could be a teacher, it could be an administrator, coach, maybe a club advisor, employer, or youth leader. Again, be sure to follow the instructions on the application. I think sometimes the big question I get from parents is, I know they're asking for 1 letter of recommendation, but what if I send 9? Doesn't that help? And I can tell you the reality is, from someone who used to read applications all day for months on end, I'm going to look at the first letter. The first letter says you're a great student. That's probably going to be good enough for me. I might skim the second one, but I sure am not going to read 7 more, right? And very rarely am I going to come up across the 9th letter that says, forget these first 8, they're actually terrible, and I'm so glad they asked me to write it because I wanted to set the record straight. So 1, 2 letters, whatever they're asking for, give them what they're asking for, no more, no less. Obviously, if they have an optional additional letter, fine, but just kind of for peace of mind, I do have those folks every year who just think more is better. Give them what they're asking for. If the recommender is not a teacher here at the high school, because those are the folks who obviously we can use Naviance, you can invite them via the Common App application under the FERPA and recommenders section. I do have situations where, and sometimes it might be someone who's not computer savvy, or there's some issues with them trying to upload and send their letter through Common App. 99% of the admissions offices that I have worked with over the years, if we really get in a situation where you're having issues on the Common App end, you can have them send their letter directly to the admissions email of that particular college or university, and then it would be added to the student's file. So just kind of a door number 2 if they're having issues with the Common App part. Could you recommend any resources or books which might be helpful at this stage of the process? We certainly can. Ourselves as counselors, obviously we have extensive experience between us in the college process. Your English teachers for these students, especially for these Common App essays or personal statements, are excellent resources for reviewing or giving suggestions. Naviance, again, is a fantastic search tool in addition to the vehicle for moving transcripts and recommendation letters. Our website, which we, again, provide as many college resources and documents and website links as we feel are pertinent to you. The college reps to the high school are very helpful. We had Miami and Ohio State here last week. I believe, just to name a few, we have, how many total do we have, Mrs. Owens? I think we have about 30 right now, and I can imagine we may have closer to 40 as we start to roll into the fall. So those are great. They are college admissions folks. Normally they're younger, so the kids, I think, are comfortable asking them questions, and they're really here to kind of have a round table with the kids about the admissions process. And oftentimes, one of the deciding factors is that students say, I really liked that person who came to the school to talk about that school or that college. Okay, so continuing, helpful books. Obviously I don't have to read off all the titles, but I do think The Student's Guide to the Colleges, The America's Top 100 Schools is a great one. And then I think by Bill Paul, which is something that this book that I actually read personally years ago, is Getting Inside the College Admissions Process, which helps parents because obviously sometimes it's what goes on behind closed doors in those offices and the decision-making process that we don't, any of us really necessarily always know, but kind of what to expect and how to cater your decision-making in your application process. And that's really, so the last slide here, obviously, as we said, college is not a prize to be won, but rather a match to be found. So at this point, I think this is the end of the presentation piece. General questions, if you have hands? Yes.
They can do either. I know some, hello? I know some of the colleges have been telling them to use a personal email. But I don't really think it's a concern if they use their BBHHS email because it lasts for at least a year after they graduate, and then they're gonna get a college email once they get on that college campus. So I think we had a couple students actually today say that they started their Common App with their BBH email and then they switched it to a personal. I don't know that it's necessary.
And this is just something, again, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to this, but if your students have a personal email, and I only know this from my wife's personal email, which is up all the time, 90 TikTok and 90 this emails flood that personal inbox all the time. Those kids are getting emails in their personal inboxes from any social media thing, all these other stuff. Sometimes with the school being the academic piece, because our emails come from there, sometimes it might be advisable to use the school email. Again, it's not gonna, it's gonna last, I think, a couple years after they graduate. It's not the end of the world if they use their personal email. My experience sometimes is the personal email things can get lost in the shuffle.
I know institutions might have said like it might go to spam or might go to other, so obviously I would encourage your students to check their spams and the different folders of whatever email they're using for their applications.
Yeah, if the colleges list a letter of recommendation as optional, do you still recommend getting one or?
I would, I mean, my advice would be if it's one optional, I would say it's probably wise, yeah. And I think most of the time, especially if you already have, can everybody hear me? My voice tends to carry, so I don't want to yell as